The Legend of the Veil has now been out since last Thursday, and it is the best voyage to ever be added to Sea of Thieves. But what makes this voyage so special, and why is the community loving it more than any other voyage? In this video we're going to be diving into everything this spectacular voyage does well, and some of the constructive criticisms I have of it. Here are my personal opinions on the Legend of the Veil. Let's start with the positives of the Legend of the Veil. First off, the modular format. I am genuinely in love with this format. Whilst the voyage isn't the longest in the world, the modules are a massive step in the right direction for Sea of Thieves. We've always seen quests varying to differing levels of degrees, whether it's certain Tall Tale sections being altered slightly, or quests being on different islands. Within anything Sea of Thieves related, they've always been varied. The Legend of the Veil, however, takes this to a whole new level. With the modular format, there are whole sections of the voyage that are completely changed on every run. Let me explain this for people who don't understand. The Legend of the Veil consists of 3 modules. The last module is always the same, which is battling a ghost garrison in a giant maelstrom. The first 2, however, can be picked from 3 different modules. Haunted Islands, which are fighting phantoms alongside ancients as you summon them back to the world. Shipwreck Graveyards, which is exploring a battleground of sunken ships that were overpowered by sirens. Or lastly, a map module, where there are now over 3 more different types of map that you can get given. So there are 3 base modules that can be chosen, but there are also many mini modules within each module. Let me explain this. Within the map modules there are 3 subsections as mentioned. You can either get a lying map, a zoom map, or a pictorial map. With Shipwreck Graveyards, you can get vertical, horizontal, or a diagonal arrangement of shipwrecks. And with Haunted Islands, I haven't found anything that differs too much yet, though feel free to let me know down in the comment section if anything you find. A point of interest though, is the Pirate Lord's dialogue in this quest is the only dialogue which is set. Suds, Bells, and the High Priest's dialogue also varies, so a big positive about this voyage is the variation within it. The next thing that they absolutely smash is the experience. Combining the elements of Tall Tales with voyages is such a good idea, although it does slightly stab them in the back, which I'll go into a little later in the video. For the positives though, it leaves the feeling of an adventure in your mouth, and you immediately want to replay it. The dialogue, the music, the lore, and the VFX just make the adventure on a whole new level, and I think that after seeing the reception of the Legend of the Veil, the developers will probably end up making more quests just like this, especially after the Pirate Lord said at the end, "And I may even call upon you to use the Veil not too soon." The great thing is, it's like a Tall Tale that gives loot, and it's not just a small amount either. It isn't just the most viable way to grind Athena reputation, it's one of the most viable ways to get gold in the whole game. Because Athena's fortune is so incredibly deprived of content, we absolutely savour this voyage, eager for any break from the boring regular voyages. In general, Sea of Thieves has been slowly, and is, moving towards a more cinematic game experience. In all kinds of recent content, we've seen more and more Tall Tale elements dripping into the main game. A Pirate's Life, The Sunken Kingdom, Adventures, and now The Legend of the Veil are all prime examples of this, which is really exciting. But as I mentioned, it also does a little harm, which again I'll talk about later. They're really honing in on their live service approach, constantly evolving the world, and because of this, it really is hard to get bored of it. When there's an epic cinematic content that gives loot and rep. I mean, what more can we realistically ask for? I've said to multiple people about the Legend of the Veil who are confused about the concept, think of it as a Tall Tale that you get loot from, not as a voyage with cinematic elements. The great thing as well is that because it feels like a Tall Tale, whilst originally a problem could be that you getting loot would slow the pace of it down, because most of the loot you get at the end, you can quickly go through the voyage and experience the cinematic elements without worrying about, oh, have I picked up this bit of loot, have we harpooned this, as most of the loot you get is at the end. The final thing that makes the Legend of the Veil so good is actually nothing to do with it, and that's the level cap being raised and the rewards and commendations associated with it being added. I genuinely think that if they didn't raise their level cap or add the rewards, the voyage would be more of a Oh cool, a good way to grind Athena up, and not a long-lasting impact for Voyage which it's setting out to be. So all in all, because of these factors, The Legend of the Veil is just so incredibly replayable. I would argue it's one of the most replayable things in the whole of the Sea of Thieves. But whilst there is an incredible amount of positives, I do want to talk about a couple of feedback points. The first of which being the story it's set in. Because of the live adventures being limited time, in a year's time for example, the lore to new pirate legends may not make sense because they can't access the Shrouded Deep anymore. Whilst a quick YouTube search will do the trick, it's not quite the same as playing it through. Now for the elephant in the room I've been mentioning. Why adding tall tale mechanics can also be a slight negative. When adding tall tale mechanics and turning it into a cinematic experience, turning the world into a more cinematic world, it takes the specialness of Tall Tales away from them. A prime example of this is Sea of Thieves Shores of Gold. When this first released, we were literally blown away by a sliding rock. Now if that were to happen, we wouldn't even care. Tall Tales are meant to be special, that's why they take so much hard work and passion. They're a new kind of cinematic experience away from the main game, albeit they do have their own set of problems themselves. I think the main problem for Sea of Thieves' cinematic world overall is facing right now is that including Tall Tales within a constantly evolving game. Tall Tales have to be their own story arc. They have to have a starting point and an ending point, which is universal no matter what rare add or change to the base game. For example, A Pirate's Life. It starts with a problem, and afterwards nothing has really changed too much other than introduced some new factions. I'll be making a separate video on why I think Sea of Thieves needs a proper campaign and what it could look like in the near future. My biggest issue with The Legend of the Veil, however, is actually with the sheer amount of mechanics and assets. In Tall Tales, it's always a big grand adventure because of how much just stuff there is. It immerses you like a film. With the new exclusive Pirate Legend Voyage, whilst it immerses you, it doesn't take too long, and because it's not part of a big story arc that's on demand, you feel left afterwards a bit confused. Whilst all of the new features were great, at the end when The Good Guys 1 music kicked in and the Pirate Lord celebrating me and saying how much I've done, my brain was just saying no. Going back to the exclusivity of some of the Tall Tale mechanics, moments like at the end of The Legend of the Veil are reserved for the endings of a Tall Tale set. Big heartfelt moments. A tying in point to this is the length of the voyage. Whilst I and many others have praised the length of it for being not too long, you end up expecting it to be longer than it actually is. You expect it to have lots of VO in the final battle like in Lords of the Sea, because they're having all these Tall Tale mechanics, so it feels like one, but it's not. If it were a tale, you can bet that the battle at the end would have been a lot longer and the Pirate Lord would be fighting with you, and there would be plot twists, the Servant of the Flame would be yelling down at you from above. When it begins and the banner comes up at the start, you feel like, yeah, here we go, Tall Tale time. But actually, it doesn't quite live up to what you feel. It's like they're giving half of their effort that they put into the tales, and a lot of the length of the voyage is actually sailing. The thing about the Pirate's Life tales, if you're saying that they were short, is that yes, they weren't the longest in the world, but there was no sailing. It was like a movie, constant cinematic experience. Back to The Legend of the Veil, on one hand, I'm in a big maelstrom, whilst on the other, I'm back to using a map. They're the kind of mechanics that we're having, they vary dramatically. Whenever the Pirate Lord appeared and had a few lines of dialogue, it felt a bit unnecessary and underwhelming when he just said, "Good work, keep it up." I'm not saying Tall Tale mechanics are a bad thing by the way, including them into the world. I'd love to see them in the game more elsewhere. But Tall Tales need to keep their exclusivity, as currently Sea of Thieves' only means of campaign is them. The big issue with Tall Tales in general though, is the bar keeps being raised. Shores of Gold, they were brilliant for the time. Nowadays, if the first date were added in a new update, we would be very underwhelmed. Seabound Soul and Heart of Fire were a big step up, but then A Pirate's Life smashed both of them out of the park. It seems like Tall Tales always headline new mechanics, and from there they drip feed those mechanics into the game in other means. So eventually we should get another Tall Tales. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. To conclude on this final point, I think it just would have been nice for the quest to be a bit longer, a bit more cinematic, slash leaning towards Tall Tales, and having the Athena commendations under Athena, but having the more story-based and the Voyage-based commendations under the Tall Tales category. Generally, in my personal opinion, I think all adventures in themselves should be archived in a sense, not giving rewards but being replayable, as whilst I love limited time content it gets me to play the game, I would still love to be able to replay all of them, as it would allow especially new players to understand the story up until now. And there we go, these are just my personal thoughts on The Legend of the Veil, and I want to reiterate, I absolutely love this Voyage and will be grinding it out so much. I want to see more like it, I love the idea of Tall Tale hybrid Voyages. There just needs to be some slight adjustment that needs to be made, which I've mentioned in this video. But anyway, these are just my personal opinions on all this, and I'd be really interested to hear yours down in the comments below. As personally, as you can probably tell, I'm a really big fan of Tall Tales, and I never want to see them lose their exclusivity. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like, it helps out a ton, and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest Sea of Thieves news as and when it comes out. Because now that Season 6 is gone, all the content's been released, we do start to gaze our eyes to what Season 7 could possibly behold. But anyways, apart from that, thanks for watching and I'll see you later.